My name is Kevin, my wife, Laura, and I moved into a beautiful Victorian house on a quiet street last year. The price was surprisingly low, which should have been a red flag, but the house was perfect, large, historic, and full of character. The first few nights were peaceful, but then I began to hear strange noises. It started as a low humming. I thought it was the pipes or the old wood settling, but the sound persisted. Late at night, when everything else was quiet, I could hear voices. I assumed it was the neighbors, but the voices never sounded like any of them. They were distant, muffled, as though coming from inside the walls. At first, I brushed it off, thinking I was just imagining things. But one night, I couldn't sleep. The voices were clearer now. I got out of bed and followed the sound to the hallway, where I noticed something strange. One of the walls near the staircase was slightly bulging. I pushed against it, and to my surprise, it gave way. The wall opened up, revealing a hidden room. It was small, barely big enough for me to stand in, but the air inside was cold, damp, and it smelled wrong. I stepped in. The voices stopped. The room was covered in scratches, like something had been trying to claw its way out. The floor was littered with broken furniture, and in the corner, there was a small, tattered book. I opened it. The pages were filled with frantic scribbles, the ink smudged as though the writer had been in a hurry. But one sentence stood out. "They can hear you." Suddenly, the voices started again, louder this time. Panicked, I ran out of the room and slammed the wall shut. Laura woke up to find me sitting in the living room, trembling. "What happened?" she asked. "The walls," I said. "The voices, they're still in there. We left that night, and we've never looked back. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I still hear the voices, whispering from within the walls, urging me to come back." My name is Mason. My girlfriend, Kate, and I moved into an old cottage in the woods, far from the nearest town. We'd wanted a quiet escape, and the cottage seemed perfect, but there was something strange about the place from the very beginning. One of the first things we noticed were the footprints at night, after we went to bed. We'd wake up in the morning to find fresh footprints in the snow outside. They were always just outside the front door, leading toward the woods. I checked the locks every night, convinced it was some kind of prank, but every morning, the prints were still there. They weren't human though. The shape was odd too, large, too deep for a person's footsteps. Kate was starting to get unnerved. "Mason, this isn't funny anymore," she said one evening as I examined the prints again. "We need to leave." But I brushed it off, too stubborn to admit I was scared. That night, as the wind howled outside, I heard something footsteps. But they weren't outside. They were coming from inside the house. I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and checked every room. Nothing. But when I went into the kitchen, I froze. There, in the dust on the floor, were fresh footprints. Only, they didn't lead anywhere. They appeared out of thin air. "Kate," I shouted. Kate rushed into the kitchen, but by the time she arrived, the footprints were gone. We couldn't explain it. The next morning, the prints were outside again, but this time, they were closer to the house leading up to the front door. I bolted it shut and checked the entire cottage. Every window, every door, locked tight, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. That night, we heard the footsteps again, louder, clearer, as though they were circling the house. When I went to check, there was nothing. Kate left the next morning, but I stayed behind. I wanted to prove there was an explanation. But now, every time I step outside, I see the prints leading into the woods, but never coming back. My name is Sarah. My husband, Ben, and I moved into an old farmhouse a few weeks ago. It was perfect for our young daughter, Lily, who loved the large backyard and the quiet, peaceful atmosphere. But there was something we didn't expect. It all started with Lily's drawings. One morning, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, drawing furiously. The paper was covered with strange, childish sketches, houses, trees, and people, but there was something unsettling about them. Each drawing depicted the same figure, a tall, faceless man with long arms, his fingers twisted in unnatural ways. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Lily looked up at me, her eyes wide with innocence. "That's the man in the attic." Ben and I exchanged uneasy glances. We had checked the attic when we first moved in, and there was nothing unusual there. But that night, I heard something. A scraping noise, like fingers running along the walls. I couldn't ignore it. I walked up to the attic door. It was locked, as it had been before, but I felt an overwhelming urge to open it. I grabbed the key from the drawer and unlocked the door. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. The attic was empty, no furniture, no boxes, nothing but an old wooden floor. But against the far wall, the same figure from Lily's drawings stood, his long arms reaching toward me. I stepped back, heart racing. But when I turned to leave, I saw Lily standing at the top of the stairs, holding one of her drawings. "He's not happy you opened the door," she said softly. We didn't stay long after that. We left the next morning, but every time I close my eyes, I can still see the man's twisted fingers, waiting. My name is Luke. My girlfriend, Emily, and I moved into a large, secluded home on the outskirts of town. It was the perfect place to get away from the hustle and bustle, and it was within our budget. The only catch: the house had an attic that wasn't mentioned during the sale. We first noticed it one evening when we were unpacking. Emily was in the living room, and I was upstairs when I heard faint whispers. I paused, listening. The words were indistinct at first, like a conversation, just out of reach. I shook it off. "Just the wind," I muttered to myself. That night, the whispers got louder. They came from the attic, but when I checked, there was nothing. Just dust and old furniture that hadn't been touched in years. Emily, starting to feel uncomfortable, suggested we ignore it. But the whispers didn't stop. Every night, they grew clearer, and soon, they weren't whispers anymore, they were full sentences. "Help us," they begged. At first, we thought it was some kind of trick, maybe a sound system hidden in the attic. I climbed up to investigate, determined to find the source. But what I found made my blood run cold. The attic was empty. Not a single speaker or recording device. Just an old, rotting trunk in the corner. I opened it. Inside, there was nothing but a crumpled sheet of paper with a single word written on it. Run. That night, the whispers turned into screams. They came from all around, oozed through the walls, the floors, the ceiling. We packed our bags and left the house, but the last thing I heard before driving away was a voice in my ear, clear as day: "You can't leave." My name is Aaron. A few weeks ago, my wife, Natalie, and I moved into a charming old house with floor-to-ceiling mirrors in nearly every room. The previous owner had been an artist, obsessed with reflections. At first, we thought it was beautiful. Then, we started noticing inconsistencies. One evening, while brushing my teeth, I looked up and saw my reflection staring at me. Not moving, just watching. I blinked. It didn't. I turned away, heart pounding. When I looked again, everything was normal, just tired. I muttered. Then, Natalie saw something too. There was someone else in the mirror, she whispered one night. Behind me. I checked. Just our reflections. But the house felt wrong. One night, I stayed up late, determined to catch whatever was happening. I sat in front of the living room mirror. Staring. 2:47 a.m. My reflection tilted its head. I hadn't moved. A chill crawled up my spine. Then, it smiled. I didn't. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. The glass cracked. The reflection stepped forward. I ran. The next morning, we covered all the mirrors. But at night, we could hear faint tapping coming from underneath. the sheets. Like something was trying to get out. We moved out a week later, but sometimes, in the corner of my eye, I catch a glimpse of a reflection that isn't quite mine. My name is Elliot. My wife, Samantha, and I moved into our dream house last month. It was an old Victorian-style home, full of charm and history. But there was one thing we couldn't explain: a door that wasn't supposed to be there. It was in the hallway between our bedroom and the guest room. When we checked the house's blueprint, that section of the house was supposed to be a solid wall, but there it was, a door. Weird, Samantha muttered. Should we open it? I hesitated. Something about it felt wrong. That night, I woke up to creaking floorboards. The door was slightly ajar. Samantha, I whispered. She was fast asleep. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed toward the hallway. The door was wider now, revealing darkness beyond. I reached out, hand trembling, and pushed it open. Cold air rushed past me. Inside was a small, windowless room. Dust floated in the stale air. In the center stood a single wooden chair, facing the corner. Then I saw the writing on the walls. Don't sit, don't look, don't stay. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, nothing there. Then I heard the chair scrape against the floor. I ran the next morning. The door was gone, just a blank wall where it had been. But at night, we still hear the creaking floorboards, and sometimes the sound of a chair dragging across the floor. My name is Brandon, my wife Lisa, and I moved into our new home with our son Oliver 2 weeks ago. It was perfect, spacious, affordable, and in a quiet neighborhood. But there was something strange about the upstairs hallway. A closet door stood between 2 bedrooms, but when I opened it, there was nothing, just a solid wall. No shelves, no storage space, just a door leading nowhere. Probably a renovation mistake, Lisa said. I agreed, until the knocking started, every night. At exactly 3:12 a.m., soft knocks echoed from inside the closet. Lisa and I both heard it. Oliver did too. Daddy, there's someone in the closet, he whispered one morning. I checked, knocking back just to prove it was empty. The moment my knuckles touched the wood, something knocked back. I slammed the door shut. That night, I locked it. At 3:12 a.m., we woke to scratching sounds. Lisa clutched my arm. Brandon. The door. It was open. A foul stench filled the hallway, damp earth and rotting wood. The shadows near the closet stretched unnaturally, twisting along the walls. Then, Oliver's voice called from inside. Mommy. Lisa gasped. Ollie? I stopped her. Oliver was asleep in his bed. The voice came again. Daddy, let me out. I grabbed Lisa and ran. The next morning, we packed our things. As we left, I heard one last whisper from behind the closet door. You can't leave. This is your home now. We never looked back. My name is Jacob. A month ago, my wife, Megan, and I moved into what we thought was our dream home. It was a beautiful 2-story house with a finished basement, perfect for storage or even a game room. But from the first night, something felt off. It started with noises. A soft shuffling beneath the floorboards, like someone walking in the basement. At first, I thought it was the house settling, until one night, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. At 2:14 a.m., our basement door creaked. Opened. Megan sat up beside me. Did you hear that? I grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed and crept downstairs. The basement light flickered as I descended. The air smelled stale, damp. Nothing, but just as I turned to go back up, I noticed something. The small window, near the ceiling, the one too narrow for anyone to fit through, was unlocked. I locked it, brushed it off, and went back to bed. The next morning, Megan frowned at me over breakfast. Jacob, did you leave the basement door open? No, I said. We exchanged a look. That night, I placed a chair in front of the basement door, just in case. At 2:14 a.m., I woke to the sound of wood scraping against the floor. The chair had moved. The door was wide open. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding, and tiptoed downstairs. The basement light flickered violently. Shadows stretched unnaturally against the walls. Then I saw him, a man, gaunt, hollow-eyed, standing in the corner. His face was wrung too long, too pale. His lips curled into a smile. "You shouldn't have locked me out," he whispered. The light flickered once more, and he was gone. We moved out the next day, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up, and I swear I hear footsteps beneath the floor. My name is Ethan. 3 months ago, my wife, Laura, and I moved into a charming old house on Hollow Street with our 6-year-old daughter, Emily. The house had history Laura loved, but something about it unsettled me from the start. The first night, as we unpacked, Emily ran into the kitchen with a wide-eyed expression. "Daddy, there's a boy in my room." Laura and I exchanged a look. "Sweetheart, we just moved in. There's no one here," she pouted. He was standing by my window. He had no eyes. A chill ran down my spine, but Laura brushed it off. "It's just her imagination," she whispered. That night I woke to a soft creaking. The hallway floorboards groaned, as if someone was walking outside our room. I held my breath, listening. Then, Emily screamed. I bolted into her room, finding her curled up under her blanket. Her small body trembled. "The boy was here," she sobbed. "He whispered my name." I searched the room, checking the closet and under the bed. Nothing. Just shadows stretching unnaturally in the moonlight. The following days, strange things happened. Doors creaked open on their own. Laura's jewelry box played its eerie tune at random times. And Emily, she grew quieter. Dark circles formed under her eyes. Then, one night, I found her whispering in the corner of her room. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. She turned, her expression blank. "The boy says you should leave." A frigid wave of fear crashed over me. "Why?" She blinked. "Because you're in his house." That night, I stayed awake, determined to catch whatever was tormenting my daughter. Around 3 a.m., the air turned heavy, suffocating. A sound like nails scraping wood echoed from the walls. Then, Emily's door creaked open. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped inside. The room felt colder than the rest of the house. My breath fogged the air. And then, I saw it. A figure small, thin stood in the corner, barely visible in the dim light. His face was hollow, empty sockets where eyes should be. I wanted to run, to grab Emily and leave, but I couldn't move. The boy raised a hand and pointed. His lips parted. A whisper filled the air. "Get out." The lights flickered, and an overwhelming force shoved me backward. I hit the hallway floor as Emily's room slammed shut. Laura woke to my shouts. We packed within the hour. The next morning, I called the realtor. I demanded to know the house's history. She hesitated before answering. "The Hollow Street house." Her voice lowered. "A little boy went missing there decades ago. His body was never found. We never returned. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up to the memory of that whisper, and I wondered if we hadn't left, would we have disappeared too?" My name is Daniel. My wife Claire, and I moved into our new home 2 weeks ago, hoping for a fresh start. The house was spacious, affordable, and came with a locked room the realtor never mentioned. At first we didn't think much of it. The door was old, its keyhole rusted shut. Maybe it was just storage. But then, strange things started happening. Every night, between 2 and 3 a.m., we'd hear a faint knocking always from inside the locked room. "Probably the pipes," Claire said, but she wasn't convinced. Neither was I one night. I pressed my ear to the door. A whisper slithered through the keyhole. "Let me out." I stumbled back, my skin crawling. Claire found me standing there, frozen. "What's wrong?" she asked. I shook my head. I think someone's in there." We called a locksmith the next day. He arrived, examined the door, then frowned. "This isn't a normal lock," he muttered. "It's sealed from the inside." Claire and I exchanged uneasy glances. "Can you open it?" I asked. The locksmith hesitated. Then, with a loud snap, the lock broke. The door creaked open. A wave of stale air rolled out. Inside, the room was empty except for a single wooden chair facing the corner. Dust covered the floor, undisturbed. For years, no windows, no other doors, and yet, footprints. Small, bare footprints, leading to the chair. "Must have been squatters," the locksmith mumbled, leaving in a hurry. That night, we tried to ignore the unlocked room. But at exactly 2:33 a.m., our bedroom door creaked open. Claire clutched my arm. "Daniel," I sat up, heart hammering. A shadow stood in the doorways, small, thin. The air turned ice cold. Then, a whisper, "You shouldn't have opened it." The shadow rushed toward us. The lights went out, and we screamed. My name is Sarah. It was a late fall weekend when I decided to take my caravan out for a solo trip. I'd been craving the peace of nature, the quiet hum of the road, and the solace that came with being alone. I chose a secluded campsite deep in the woods, far from civilization, thinking it would be the perfect escape from my busy life. As I set up camp, the chill of the evening air wrapped around me, and the forest seemed to hold a strange stillness. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a deep purple hue. I couldn't shake the feeling that the trees around me were watching, as if they knew something I'd in single quotes too. By the time I finished setting up my fire pit, it was dark. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of leaves. That's when I noticed something odd. Another caravan, parked a little farther down the path, barely visible through the trees. It wasn't there when I first arrived. Curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed a flashlight and made my way toward it. As I approached, I noticed the door to the caravan was slightly ajar. I called out, expecting to find someone, maybe another solo traveler, but there was no answer. I pushed open the door, and the interior was eerily still, like it hadn't been touched in years. There were no personal belongings, no sign of life, just dust and empty shelves. I stepped inside to investigate further, but stopped when I noticed something strange. A pair of boots near the door, as if someone had stepped out and left in a hurry. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, but I couldn't leave without knowing what had happened. I stepped back outside, looking around the campsite for any sign of the person who owned the caravan. But the forest remained silent. The next morning, I woke up to find the caravan gone. No trace of it, no sign that it had ever been there at all. I checked the path leading in and out of the woods, but there was no evidence that anyone had passed through. I still don't know what happened that night. Whether it was a trick of my mind or something more sinister, I can't say for sure. But I haven't been back to that campsite since. Some things are better left unexplained. My name is Max, and I've always loved the open road. My caravan was my home away from home, a place where I could escape the noise and the chaos of everyday life. Last summer, I decided to take a solo trip to a remote mountain range, hoping to find peace and quiet among the towering pines. I arrived at the campsite late in the afternoon, just as the sun was setting behind the peaks. The place was secluded, nestled deep in the forest, with only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the occasional bird call to break the silence. It was perfect, or so I thought. As I set up my caravan, I noticed a faint whispering sound in the air, almost like voices carried by the wind. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent, just on the edge of my hearing. I brushed it off as my imagination, the wind playing tricks on me, but the sound didn't go away. That night, as I lay in bed, the whispering grew louder. It was no longer just a faint murmur. I could clearly hear words, though they were unintelligible. I opened the caravan's door, hoping to find some explanation, but there was nothing, just the dark, still forest. The next morning, the whispers were gone, but the feeling of unease remained. I decided to explore the area, hoping to clear my head. As I walked through the woods, I stumbled upon a strange clearing, unlike any I had seen before. The trees around it were twisted, their branches bent at unnatural angles. The ground was covered in dry leaves and scattered stones. But what caught my attention was the old, weathered stone circle in the center of the clearing. It looked ancient, as though it had been there for centuries. I stepped closer to examine it, but as I did, the whispering returned. This time, it was louder, more urgent, and the words seemed to make sense. Leave, or it will take you. I froze in place, my heart pounding in my chest. I quickly turned around and rushed back to my caravan, not looking back until I was safely inside. That night, the whispers grew louder than ever, now accompanied by soft scratching noises at the caravan's walls. The wind outside had picked up, but it sounded like someone or something was trying to get in. By morning, I had packed my things and left, never looking back. I don't know what I encountered that night, but I never returned to those mountains. Some places, I've learned, should be avoided, and some whispers should never be answered. My name is Luke. A few months ago, I took my old caravan out for what I thought would be a relaxing weekend getaway. I'd been cooped up with work for too long and needed a break from the city. So, I decided to head down a quiet, forgotten road, far off the beaten path, in search of solitude. The road was narrow and winding, with no other vehicles in sight. The trees along the road seemed to close in as I drove, their branches reaching like long fingers toward the sky. I kept driving, convinced that I had found the perfect escape. By the time I reached my destination, the sun was dipping below the horizon, and the forest around me was shrouded in darkness. I parked my caravan beside an old, abandoned gas station, the faded signs barely visible in the dimming light. As I set up camp, I noticed something strange. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, like the world itself was holding its breath. I shrugged it off and went about my evening, enjoying the stillness of the forest. But as night fell, I started to hear things. Soft knocks on the caravan's walls, followed by a faint scratching sound, like something was trying to get in. I opened the door to check, but there was nothing there. No animals, no people, just the eerie silence of the forest. I locked the door and went back inside, trying to shake the feeling that something was watching me. As the night wore on, the noises became louder, more persistent. At one point, I swear I heard a voice calling out from the wood, soft, faint, almost like a whisper, but unmistakably human. It was so clear that I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, convinced someone had wandered onto my camp. But the forest was empty. I went back inside, more unsettled than ever. I tried to sleep, but the whispers continued, growing louder and closer. It was as if they were coming from inside the caravan itself. I could hear footsteps, too slow and deliberate, as though someone was walking in the space just outside my door. Then, in the dead of night, the caravan shook violently, as though something massive had slammed into it. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, and opened the door, but there was no sign of anyone. I packed up and left at first light, never looking back. I've never gone near that road again, and I don't ever plan to. Some places, I've learned, are better left alone. My name is Ethan. Last summer, I decided to take my family on a road trip across the country in our new caravan. We had always enjoyed the open road, the freedom of the journey, and the adventure it promised. Our destination was a secluded lakeside campground, far from the hustle of the city. We reached our destination after several hours on a narrow, winding road, bordered by thick forest. The campsite was far removed from any towns or villages, a perfect place to disconnect from the world. As we settled in for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The forest surrounding the campsite was too quiet, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps outside the caravan. I tried to ignore it, but they grew louder, getting closer to the window. My heart raced as I peered out, but there was nothing there, just the shadows of trees dancing in the wind. I tried to dismiss it as an animal or the wind playing tricks, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next morning, I mentioned it to my wife, Claire, but she dismissed my concerns. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. As the sun set, the same strange silence filled the air. That night, the footsteps returned. This time, they were accompanied by a low, drawn-out whisper, like someone was calling my name. I jumped out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the door. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty campsite. But then I saw a figure in the distance, standing motionless by the trees. My heart pounded as I called out to it, but it didn't respond. The figure just stood there, unmoving. I wanted to run, but something held me in place. It was as though I couldn't move, paralyzed by fear. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into the night, leaving only the soft rustling of the trees in its wake. The next morning, we packed up and left without a word. As we drove away, I glanced back one last time. There, in the distance, by the same spot where the figure had stood, I saw something that made my blood run cold, a pair of eyes watching me from the darkness. We've never gone back to that road, and I never will. Some places should remain forgotten, and some encounters should never be revisited. My name is Olivia. When my partner Marcus and I bought an old caravan to escape the chaos of the city, we never imagined that our retreat would become a stage for unspeakable terror. We parked our beloved caravan on the edge of a dense forest, drawn by its eerie quiet and the promise of solitude. The caravan, though weathered, carried a charm that whispered of bygone days and forgotten secrets. The first night was peaceful, filled with the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant cry of an unknown creature. Yet, as midnight approached, a subtle disturbance awakened something within the shadows. At first, I dismissed the odd creaks and murmurs as the natural settling of the caravan. But soon, strange echoes began to manifest, whispers that seemed to seep from the very walls. Lying in bed, I could swear I heard a voice softly reciting my name, over and over, as though it were a prayer or a curse. I nudged Marcus awake, but he too was uncertain, insisting that fatigue was playing tricks on our minds. The atmosphere grew oppressive, and sleep evaded us as the night deepened. Determined to uncover the source, I rose with a trembling resolve and stepped into the narrow corridor. The beam of my flashlight danced along peeling wallpaper and creaking floorboards. In a small corner near the back, I discovered an old, dust-covered trunk, its brass latch tarnished with age. My heart pounded as I approached it. An inexplicable compulsion urged me to open it. Inside lay a collection of yellowed letters and faded photographs, all chronicling a long-forgotten family whose tragic end had been shrouded in mystery. Among the documents, one letter stood out. Its ink, smeared by time, contained a single sentence: "The echoes of our sorrow will forever haunt this place." I retreated to Marcus, who listened in stunned silence as I recounted my discovery. That very night, the whispers returned, more insistent and desperate. The voice, now unmistakably mournful, seemed to rise from the very floor beneath our feet. Every creak, every gust of wind carried a lament that resonated with our own hidden fears. As the hours ticked by, an overwhelming sensation of being trapped within a cycle of despair washed over me. I felt the presence of unseen souls, their anguish echoing through the confined space of the caravan. Marcus and I resolved to leave at first light, our plans shattered by the relentless dread that had taken hold. But when morning came, the caravan's door was ajar, as if inviting us to witness one final horror. Outside, the forest was unnaturally still. A trail of muddy footprints led from the door toward the trees, vanishing into darkness. With hearts heavy and minds racing, we gathered our belongings and fled, never daring to look back. To this day, I wonder if those echoes were the final cries of a lost family, or if our own despair had awakened something far more sinister, destined to follow us wherever we go. I still hear faint whispers when I close my eyes, soft echoes that remind me that some sorrows refuse to be forgotten, and some voices will haunt you long after the night has passed. My name is Leo. A few months ago, I bought an old caravan to take my dog, Max, and myself on weekend getaways. After a few trips, I decided to take a longer journey through a remote part of the countryside, where I knew I'd find nothing but quiet forests and open fields. I parked the caravan near a small, isolated lake, far from any towns or roads. It was the perfect spot, peaceful and still. As I set up camp, I noticed something strange in the sky. The stars were unusually bright, but there was also a faint, swirling light that I couldn't explain. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just a trick of the light. That night, Max and I went to sleep, but I woke up to a strange noise, something tapping on the roof of the caravan. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but it was rhythmic, almost like footsteps. I looked outside, but there was no one there. I couldn't see anything moving in the darkness. I lay back down, but the tapping continued. I covered my ears with my pillow, hoping it would stop. After a few minutes, I heard another sound, a low hum, like a distant engine. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside to investigate. But when I turned it on, the light flickered and then went out. In the distance, I saw faint, glowing lights moving through the trees. They were too far to make out, but they seemed to be drifting toward me. I ran back to the caravan, locked the doors, and stayed awake until morning. The lights were gone by dawn, and everything was quiet again. But the strangest thing happened when I left the campsite. As I was packing up, I noticed the sky was darker than it had been the night before, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Max and I haven't gone back to that place. I don't know what those lights were, but I don't think I ever want to find out. My name is Sarah. I've always loved the freedom of a road trip, especially in a caravan. My boyfriend, Tom, and I decided to spend a weekend away from the city, driving through the mountains in search of peace and quiet. We found a remote campsite, deep in the woods, a place where the road was barely more than a dirt path. There was no one else around. It felt perfect until night fell. As we settled into the caravan, I noticed something strange. Tom was acting a little off, staring out the window. I asked him what was wrong, but he just shook his head, saying it was nothing. We went to sleep, but in the middle of the night, I woke up to a strange feeling. It felt like we weren't alone. I sat up in bed and looked around. Everything was quiet, but then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the rearview mirror, I saw a figure standing outside the caravan. I couldn't see its face, just a dark shadow that didn't seem to move, but its presence was suffocating. "Tom," I whispered, but he didn't respond. He was still asleep, unaware of the figure standing just outside. I held my breath, not daring to move, but when I blinked, the figure was gone. The next morning, Tom and I went to check the area around the caravan. There was no sign of anyone, But when we looked at the rearview mirror, there was a handprint on the glass. We didn't stay another night. We packed up and left immediately. To this day, I never go camping without making sure all the mirrors are covered. My name is Jack. My wife Emily and I had just bought a new caravan, a little getaway from the city, to travel across the country. We'd heard the roads could be beautiful and full of adventure. We decided to take the first trip to the coast, somewhere isolated with nothing but miles of beach and the ocean breeze. The first night in the caravan, we parked right on the edge of a quiet, hidden cove. It was peaceful, far away from the noise of the world. Emily went to bed early, but I stayed up, reading a book by the light of a lantern. Then I heard it, a soft whispering. It was faint at first, like a breeze passing through the trees, but then the words became clearer. It sounded like someone calling my name, Jack, Jack. I got up thinking it was someone outside. I opened the door, expecting to see a person, but there was no one. Just the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. I returned to the caravan, and when I told Emily about the whispering, she brushed it off. Maybe it's the wind, she said, but I wasn't so sure. That night, the whispers returned. They were louder this time, and they seemed to be all around us. The next morning, Emily found a series of strange markings on the sand near our caravan, symbols drawn in the sand, ones we didn't recognize. We left that afternoon, and as we drove away, I looked back. On the horizon, I saw something dark standing near the water. I still hear the whispers sometimes, especially when I'm alone. They're always calling my name. My name is Grace. My family and I decided to take a road trip in our caravan through the mountains. It was a perfect plan, just the four of us. My husband, Dave, our 2 kids, and me. We drove 4 hours, and by the time we reached a remote camping area, it was already late. We set up camp under the stars, parked the caravan near a cliffside with a breathtaking view of the valley below. The kids were already asleep in their beds, and Dave and I were winding down for the night. But then I heard it. A soft knock on the side of the caravan. I thought it was the wind, but the knock came again. It was steady, like someone was waiting for us to answer. I told Dave to check it out, but he didn't hear anything. I figured I was just being paranoid. We went to bed, but the knocking didn't stop. It continued through the night, each knock more persistent than the last. In the morning, we checked outside, but there was no sign of anyone. No footprints, no evidence. Just the cold, empty night. We left the campsite early, and as we drove down the mountain road, I glanced in the side mirror. For a moment, I saw a figure in the rear window of the caravan. It wasn't anyone from our family. The figure was dark, blurry, and unnaturally tall. I looked away for a second, and when I glanced back, the figure was gone. We never spoke about it again, but we haven't taken the caravan anywhere near those mountains since. Something was with us that night, and I'm certain it wasn't human. My name is Adam. My girlfriend, Kate, and I had always dreamed of taking a cross-country road trip, so when we finally bought a used caravan, we were beyond excited. It was small, old, but comfortable enough for 2 people. The first few days were perfect. We drove through national parks, stopped at small towns, and shared quiet nights under the stars. But one night, something felt off. We were parked in a remote area by a lake. Kate was asleep inside the caravan, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. I kept hearing faint footsteps outside, but when I stepped out to check, there was no one around. The next morning, I found strange, muddy footprints circling the caravan. They weren't human, they were larger and had claws. Kate didn't believe me when I showed her, and I wasn't sure what to make of it myself. That night, the footsteps returned, louder this time. Then, the caravan door rattled. I rushed outside with a flashlight, but again, there was no one there. I locked the doors, but all through the night, I could hear scratching noises against the walls. In the morning, the footprints were gone, but the feeling of being watched never left. We didn't stay another night. We packed up and left the next morning, but I know something was out there in the woods that night, and it's still waiting.